The meeting was in 20 minutes. The documents were in his briefcase. One signature and a quiet act of dishonesty would solve everything. The pressure, the debt, the fear. No one would know. But as Daniel Mercer sat alone in his car outside the office building, something inside him wouldn't settle. His hands gripped the steering wheel while the morning traffic rushed past like a river of people certain of their direction. He wasn't certain. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. Just a simple prayer. God, if I'm about to make the wrong decision, stop me. What happened in the next few minutes would change the course of his life and reveal how a single prayer can redirect a path we cannot see. The rain had started sometime before dawn. Not a storm, just a steady gray drizzle that painted the highway in long streaks of reflected light. The kind of morning that made everything feel heavier. Daniel Mercer drove through it in silence. The radio was on, but he wasn't listening. His briefcase sat on the passenger seat beside him. Inside were documents that had kept him awake most of the night, pages filled with numbers that looked harmless until you knew what they meant. If he signed them, the company would approve a construction contract worth millions, and the hidden defects in the material reports would disappear. Daniel tightened his grip on the wheel. It had started 2 weeks earlier in a quiet meeting room when Mr. Holloway slid the folder across the table. "Just a formality," the executive had said smoothly. "The suppliers missed a few testing steps. Nothing dangerous. But if we delay now, we lose the contract." Daniel had studied the pages. Missing certifications. Skipped inspections. Things that shouldn't be ignored. "I can't approve this," Daniel had said. Mr. Holloway leaned back calmly. "You can, and if you do, this project saves the company millions and protects a lot of jobs." Then his voice lowered, "Including yours." That night, Daniel told Lisa everything while they sat at the kitchen table. Their mortgage payment was already late. Medical bills from their daughter's surgery still stacked the counter. Lisa didn't tell him what to do. She simply placed her hand over his. "We'll get through this somehow," she said. But Daniel knew the truth. If he refused the deal, he would almost certainly lose his job. Now the meeting was 20 minutes away. One signature, one decision, and everything would change. The windshield wipers swept back and forth. Daniel pulled into the parking lot across from the office building, but didn't turn off the engine. People hurried past in raincoats and umbrellas. Inside his chest, something twisted. He had already convinced himself. Just sign. Just survive. No one will ever know. Yet the closer the moment came, the heavier the silence in the car felt. Daniel leaned forward, resting his forehead on the steering wheel. He hadn't prayed in years, but the words came anyway. "God, if I'm about to make the wrong decision, stop me." He sat there for a moment. Nothing happened, just the sound of rain tapping the windshield. Finally, Daniel exhaled slowly. Maybe that was his answer. He reached for the ignition and pulled out of the parking lot. The highway ramp curved upward toward the morning traffic. Cars streamed past in steady lines of headlights as Daniel merged into the flow. His mind kept replaying the same conversation over and over. "You're overthinking this," Mr. Holloway had said. "It's business." Maybe it was. Maybe integrity was just a luxury people with stable lives could afford. The GPS on Daniel's dashboard estimated the drive at 12 minutes. 12 minutes to decide who he was going to be. The rain grew slightly heavier. Halfway up the ramp, a small orange light flickered on his dashboard. Low tire pressure. Daniel frowned. That's strange. He had filled the tires just days ago. The warning light blinked again. Reluctantly, he signaled and eased the car onto the shoulder near the top of the ramp. Traffic roared past while he stepped out into the cool rain. The rear tire looked slightly soft, not flat, just enough to worry him. He kicked it lightly and sighed. Really? Today? Daniel climbed back into the driver's seat and checked the clock. He still had time if he drove carefully. As he reached to shift the car back into gear, something caught his eye. Up ahead on the main highway, a sudden ripple of brake lights. Then another. Within seconds, the entire line of traffic slowed violently. Daniel leaned forward. A horn blared, then another, and then a deafening metallic crash echoed across the wet pavement. 2 semi-trucks had collided just beyond the ramp entrance. One jackknifed across 3 lanes. The other slammed into a line of cars that had no room to escape. Daniel watched in stunned silence as the chain reaction unfolded. More cars crashed. Metal twisted. Glass exploded. Smoke began to rise through the rain. His heart pounded. The exact stretch of highway where the crash happened was where he would have been, right in the middle of it. If he hadn't stopped. If that warning light hadn't blinked. Daniel gripped the steering wheel slowly. A strange realization crept over him. 10 minutes earlier, he had prayed, "God, if I'm about to make the wrong decision, stop me." The highway ahead was now completely blocked by wreckage, and Daniel Mercer was sitting safely on the shoulder. The sirens began within minutes. Police cruisers raced past Daniel's car while emergency vehicles forced their way through the growing traffic jam. Drivers stepped out of their vehicles, staring down the highway at the wreckage. Daniel didn't move. His hands rested on the steering wheel exactly where they had been when the crash happened. His mind replayed the moment again and again. If he hadn't stopped, if he had merged onto the highway when he intended, he would have been directly in the path of the jackknifing truck. The realization made his stomach turn. A knock on the window startled him. A highway patrol officer stood outside in a reflective jacket. Daniel rolled the window down. "You all right, sir?" the officer asked. "Yes," Daniel said quietly. The officer glanced at the tire. "Looks like that sensor might have saved you a bad morning." Daniel swallowed. "You mean the accident?" The officer nodded toward the highway. "Big one. Drivers didn't have time to react on the wet pavement. You would have been right in that line if you merged earlier." Daniel followed the officer's gaze toward the mangled line of vehicles. Rain continued to fall gently over the scene. "Take the next exit," the officer said. "Highway's going to be closed for hours." Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you."
As the officer walked away, Daniel leaned back in the seat. Hours ago, he believed the most important decision of his life involved signing a dishonest document. Now he realized something deeper. Life itself had nearly ended before that decision could even be made. He thought about his daughter, about Lisa, about the prayer he whispered in the parking lot. And suddenly the path forward felt clear. Daniel started the car again, but this time he didn't turn toward the office building. Instead, he drove home.
Lisa was standing in the kitchen when Daniel walked through the front door. She looked surprised. "You're back already?" Daniel set the briefcase down slowly. "The meeting?" she asked. "I'm not going." Lisa studied his face. "What happened?" Daniel poured himself a glass of water before answering. "There was an accident on the highway." Her expression softened with concern. "Were you hurt?" "No." He paused. "I was supposed to be in it." Lisa froze. Daniel explained everything: the warning light, the crash, the prayer he had whispered minutes earlier. When he finished, the kitchen felt very quiet. Finally, Lisa spoke. "So what will you do now?" Daniel looked at the briefcase on the table. Inside were the papers that had felt like the weight of the world just hours earlier. He opened it, then calmly removed the contract. "I'm going to tell them the truth," he said. "And if they fire me?" Lisa smiled gently. "Then we'll find another way." Daniel nodded. For the first time in weeks, the knot in his chest had disappeared. Because sometimes the answer to a prayer isn't a voice. Sometimes it's a moment, a delay, a flashing warning light, a turn that keeps you from continuing down the wrong road. Daniel Mercer went to work the next day and refused to sign the contract. He did lose that job, but months later he would find another position with a company known for its integrity. And every time he drove past that stretch of highway, he remembered the morning when one simple prayer changed everything. Sometimes faith doesn't remove the difficult decision. Sometimes it simply redirects us long enough to see the path we were never meant to take. If this story moved you, share it with someone who may need to hear it. And in the comments, tell us, have you ever experienced a moment where a prayer changed the direction of your life? Follow Lanes and Lanterns for more true-to-life stories about faith, timing, and the mysterious moments that guide our lives.